So we've heard that 150 Israeli civilians have been kidnapped by Hamas. There are thought to be hostages held by them from 30 different countries. Now, you were Prime Minister when Israel's Gilad Shalit was kidnapped, and that was a very high-profile case, which ultimately led to a release and an exchange with Palestinian prisoners. Hamas is saying that they won't talk about that now during the war. Do you see any hope for some sort of deal or even a rescue operation?
I don't know to say about the rescue operation at this stage. I think it's very complex and very sensitive. I don't think that there is a good chance now for negotiating a kind of exchange agreement, and I'm not sure that I'll be in favor of an exchange where all the Palestinian prisoners will be released by Israel. The Gilad Shalit deal, which released more than 1,000 terrorist murderers, is the main reason for what happened now, because all of the leaders of Hamas that coordinated this operation and commanded this operation were released by Netanyahu in 2011 in this Shalit deal. So I'd be very careful before I would prove anything of this nature. I turned down much better deals for Israel at the time that I was Prime Minister with regard to Shalit. And I think that Israel has to be very careful. This is a problem. This is one of the problems that we have. This is a major problem. There is no question about it. 150, more or less, hostages, Israelis and non-Israelis, but they were in Israel and they were taken from Israel, is a major problem, and we'll have to deal with it. I can think of some ways of doing it, but I don't think that we should spell it out publicly. I think that we have to be very careful about it. Human lives are concerned.
So these attacks last Saturday were carried out by Hamas, and most of the rocket fires come from Hamas. But some people are suggesting that the mastermind behind this all has been Hezbollah or Iran. Now, the US has expressed concern that Iran could get directly engaged. How will this all end?
Well, probably Iran was somewhat involved. Whether they were the mastermind or whether they were actively involved, I don't know. But they definitely were behind it, because this operation served the interest of Iran, trying to stop the new alliance between America and Saudi Arabia, and normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which was aimed originally and publicly made clear that it was aimed at stopping the continued penetration of Iran into the Middle East. So Iran may decide that they want to engage themselves in a more direct manner in this confrontation. I think that's precisely why there are two aircraft carriers of America in the Middle East, and I think America made it clear that if Iran will try to intervene, Israel can deal with Iran even without America. But of course, with America it will be easier, and therefore I think that Iran will think twice before they make this irreversible step that may cause the destruction of Iran.
So, as you said, some people are suggesting that this war was to stop Saudi Arabia and Israel normalizing ties, and indeed other countries in the region also normalizing ties with Israel. Once this war is over, do you have hope still for normalization?
Well, I certainly hope. I'm not sure. Fact is that I think Saudi Arabia announced that for the time being they stopped the negotiations about normalization with Israel. So I don't know. I think that it has been aimed at stopping this, and largely maybe they were successful in doing this. Strategically, I mean, in terms of years, there is no question that the interests that we share with Saudi Arabia are much greater than the interest that Saudi Arabia as a Muslim country shares with Iran. Iran is a terrorist country. Iran is the embodiment of the philosophy of al-Qaeda and Taliban and ISIS put together. And Saudi Arabia is a country under the enlightened leadership of Mohammed bin Salam, the MBS, the Crown Prince, is trying to modernize Saudi Arabia and pull Saudi Arabia out of where they were into an entirely different world, which makes them potential friends of the State of Israel. And therefore, I think that ultimately there will be normalization. but it may now take a lot more time than we anticipated before.
So you were Prime Minister actually in the last war with Hezbollah, the second Lebanon war, and we've been seeing rockets from Hezbollah in Lebanon, we've seen shelling from Syria and threats also from Iraq. Do you see this spreading further in the region?
Number one, if the outcome of a possible future confrontation with Hezbollah will be just the last one in 2006, I think it will be a great achievement for the State of Israel. Let's not forget, from 2006 until 2023, there wasn't one bullet shot by Hezbollah across the border to Israel because they were deterred as a result of the terrible pain that they suffered in the Second Lebanese War. So they know why they were quiet for so many years. In fact, Nasrallah at the time said that had he known after the Second War in Lebanon, had he known of only 1% of my reaction to the then kidnapping of Israeli soldiers, he would have not started. And I think that it was true then, and it's true now. I would give him an advice: don't start, because this time we will not end before you are done.
We've seen before the war protests across Israel for months. Now there's an emergency unity government where former Defence Minister Benny Gantz, who was in the opposition, has joined this unity government. But the head of the opposition, Yair Lapid, hasn't joined the unity government. Would you advise him to join?
No, I wouldn't advise him to join. I didn't advise Gantz, not that he asked me, but I wouldn't have advised him had he asked me. Him and Gadi Eisenkot both are very decent, very good guys, and I have a lot of trust in both of them, but I think that they could have been very good support for the government from the outside, giving an advice, promising public support for decisions that will have to be made. But everyone that sits in the same cabinet with Ben-Gvir and Smotrich will stink.
And last question, as somebody who was Prime Minister and has directed wars against Hamas and Hezbollah, do you feel that the strategy of the Israel Defense Forces is correct, or would you advise anything to be done differently?
I can't say that I know precisely, accurately, comprehensively all the different strategies of the Israeli Defense Forces now against Hamas, and therefore I think it would be a little bit premature for me to give an advice. I trust the leadership of General al-Arabi. I think he's one of the most outstanding Israeli soldiers ever. And this was a terrible failure last Saturday, no question about it. But if I have to choose now someone that I trust to lead the Israeli armies, al-Arabi will be the guy. So I trust that he will do the right things.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for joining WION and for your insights.
Thank you very much.
When you were Prime Minister, you offered Palestinian Authority President Abbas a peace deal and a Palestinian state, and Abbas reportedly didn't get back to you. If you were Prime Minister now, would you make the same offer?
Yes, with minor tunings that may be necessary considering the time that has passed since 2008, but I think that there is no alternative. At the end, I mean, how many years are we going to fight in Gaza, or how many years we're going to fight against other terrorist organizations, a jihad? At the end, there must be a political rising. And the only possible rising that can bring an end to all of this is a two-state solution. A Palestinian state and the state of Israel alongside. Now we have to work very hard in order to build up the rapport, the trust, the kind of personal relations between leaders that can move it forward.
And do you think if Israel is able to dismantle Hamas, that there'll be some sort of agreement for the Palestinian Authority to take back control of Gaza?
It will take time. It will not be automatic as a result of the dismantling of Hamas by Israel. There will have to be an interim period in which Gaza will be reorganized with maybe an international force that will be stationed there for a period of time, and then the Palestinian Authority will come and take over. Yeah, this is needed. This was my strategy at the time that I was Prime Minister. I wanted to do it. I didn't have enough time to be able to accomplish what I wanted, and I retired earlier than I was planned before. But this is a strategy. There can be no other. We have to take over to remove Hamas from Gaza. Gaza has to be returned to the Palestinian Authority as part of the Palestinian state, which has to be established alongside the state of Israel. And this is something that not only the Palestinians need to want, but also the Israeli leadership. And I'm not certain that at this time the Israeli leadership is particularly anxious to establish this track that can lead into meaningful negotiations.
And do you think President Abbas would accept that offer if it was offered again?
I hope so. I can't speak for him, but I hope so very much.
Can you take us back to where you were on the 7th of October when thousands of Hamas terrorists infiltrated into Israel? And at what stage did you realise that this was on another level like we haven't seen before, and this was in fact Israel's 9/11?
Well, actually, I was with my family, 16 of us, in Sicily, and we were scheduled to fly back to Israel on Saturday. And I woke up at about 6:30 in the morning, Sicily time, which was 7:30 Israeli time, and I saw on the phone 150 WhatsApps. So I immediately understood that something unusual happened. When I started to look at it and I found out what it was, I absolutely immediately realized that there is something quite different from everything that I was used to that took place right there, that was taking place actually right there. The scope, the width, the number of terrorists, the number of townships that were attacked at the same time, and the penetration through the fence into the state of Israel, immediately I understood that this is something of a different magnitude and different scale that took place. And then my first concern was how fast can I get back to Israel, and whether or not the flight will take off. Actually, the flight took off at time, and I was early afternoon already back home. And since then, I was, of course, hooked into every possible avenue and source of information to find out precisely what was going on, to understand, to assess, to think, to maybe share some thoughts based on my experience with decision makers. And it actually carries on until now.
So Israel is thought to be about to do a ground operation, and Israel has received a lot of criticism for its plans. There's concern for Palestinian lives. Israel has asked civilians in Gaza to move from the north to the south to get to safety. There are some who are suggesting that never before in the history of warfare has an army given so much warning to an enemy before striking. What would you say to Israel's critics in this regard?
There is a lot of hypocrisy in the criticism against the state of Israel. Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's ISIS, it's al-Qaeda, it's Taliban. What does one expect Israel to do? We have to reach out for them. We have to destroy them. We have to make sure that they are removed from the dominant control in Gaza, because without this, there will never be peace, there will never be reconciliation, there will never be truce. So what shall we do? Shall we not do anything because the lives of Palestinians are important? The lives of the babies of Israel which were beheaded, and the mothers which were raped and killed, and the elderly people and the hostages are equally important, and we have to do something to stop it. So on the other hand, we are ridiculed for giving so many warnings in advance. We give many warnings because we feel that in spite of the terrible disaster on Saturday, which was an absolute failure of the Israeli intelligence systems and the army defending the fence, Israel is very powerful, and Israel can afford itself to give warnings in advance and yet to carry out the necessary military operations which will change the tide in Gaza, and it will happen sooner or later. It will happen in spite of the criticism of the international community, which I think is grossly unfair, imbalanced, and inappropriate considering the circumstances and the brutality of the atrocities committed by the Hamas and the nature of Hamas, which is absolutely going to try and carry on these atrocities if they will only be given the opportunity. So we have to stop.